Hello once again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, back to do what many of you have been waiting for a bit now, and that is my review of the Audeze LCD-5 planar magnetic open back headphone. Their new top-of-the-line planar magnetic model that sells for $4,500 US, and I will link to the Audeze webpage down below where you can buy this headphone if you so choose. Now, some quick housekeeping items as usual. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to support me so that you can continue to see more of this kind of content, please like and subscribe and be on the lookout for how you can support me in other ways moving forward. The channel is growing. Just found out on the morning of this filming that I have eclipsed the 500 subscribers mark, which is exciting. So thank you to all of those who are out there subscribing and watching. Let's keep it rolling, okay? It's been a lot of fun. All right, I hope it has been as much fun for you as it has been for me. Well, but I guess I'm the one that has gotten to listen, so there's that, okay? But please continue to have fun vicariously through me. Anyway, back to the LCD-5. Okay, so a little while ago, I posted a first impressions video about this headphone, which I will also link to below in the description, where I did a fairly deep dive for an impressions video on the build quality of this unit, because Audeze put a lot of changes to their basic LCD series design into this headphone, while still making it like a recognizably Audeze LCD series headphone. So, I mean, I will just reiterate here, kudos to Audeze for taking some of the criticisms, many of the criticisms that they had on their basic LCD physical design, and addressing a lot of it quite successfully, because this is a far more comfortable headphone than most Audeze LCDs. And I also reviewed very recently the 2021 revision of the LCD-X, which is still the classic LCD design. And this is much, much more comfortable than that for long periods of listening. So good job to Audeze on that. Now, one thing that some users, comfort-wise, might object to is that the clamp here is fairly strong, but for me, that is balanced out by the softness of the pads. Okay, the pads were a little bit stiff at first because this was a brand new out-of-the-box unit. They were a little stiff at first, but they broke in fairly quickly, and it's pretty comfortable. And so, yes, it is tight and snug on the head, but I have not found it fatiguing or painful physically in any way. Okay, so again, good job, Audeze, for addressing some of those physical design flaws. They really did well on that. All right, the stock cable, I mentioned this briefly in my impressions video. I mean, it looks like this with a kind of a vinyl insulated, okay, 4-conductor wire here that terminates in the classic, Audeze dual 3-pin, 4-pin, dual 4-pin mini XLR. Okay, this cable is okay. I mean, you can kind of see it bunches up a little bit, but it also untangles pretty easily. I hope that the video just caught that and you were able to see that. Okay, it's all right. Nothing to really write home about. I did think that it got a little bit in the way sonically. For whatever reason, it pushed like the 1 to 2 kilohertz frequency range forward just a little bit. That was the biggest thing that I noticed. And then the treble was not as smooth as I would have liked with that cable. So a friend sold to me recently this Forza Noir Hybrid HPC cable, which I have been using for most of this testing. And this tamed that slight mid-forwardness a little bit, smoothed out the treble response, and made it a little bit more tonally balanced through the treble. Okay, so I do recommend a nicer aftermarket cable if you're going to spend $4,500 for this headphone. Okay, so there's that. There was some discussion when I posted my impressions video about what amps that you should use to drive this headphone with. It is low impedance. I I forget, and usually I write this down. I think I said it in my impressions video. It is, I think, somewhere in the teens for impedance, and I will look this up and put it in the description just so we're clear. It's somewhere in the teens for impedance and about 90 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So that implies that it might be somewhat of a load and current hungry as far as amplifiers go. And there was some discussion about how well it could be driven by portable or transportable devices. Okay, so for most of my listening with this, I used my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC and my Vioelectric HPA V281 headphone amp, which provides plenty of power and plenty of current for this. However, I did also do some listening with my Hugo 2 transportable DAC amp and also plug these directly into my Canon N6II DAP with EO2 module. And honestly, I did not hear any problems through either the Hugo 2 or the Canon DAP. None of the telltale signs of being underpowered were there for me in the sound. Like, there were not big noticeable dips in frequency response. There was not a lack of treble control or mid-range control that is characteristic, like just excessively peaky mids or treble that can be a telltale sign of an amp that is struggling to properly power a headphone throughout the entire frequency range. And truthfully, even on my N6II with EO2 module, it sounded fine. Now, these are resolving enough that I could tell that the EO2 module is not on the level of performance of either the Hugo 2 or my desktop gear that I just named, or that the Hugo 2 is anywhere near the performance level of the desktop gear that I named. But they did the job. They sounded fine. There was still some good bass punch and slam. It worked out well. The one thing that I will say there about driving them with transportable gear is that the battery was draining faster than with, say, the Utopia or other easier-to-drive dynamic models from Focal or the Fostex Biodyna-based models, like those kinds of things. So it did drain the battery noticeably quicker, and so it will cut into the amount of time, listening time you get, but I didn't really notice any big sonic flaws. Okay, I'm sure there will be debate about that. I'm just reporting what my ears told me. So you could use this in transportable settings, but one moment, it's right behind me. I don't know if you'll want to physically, like if you're going to travel with it, you basically have a small suitcase size box to carry these in. Audeze does these hard carrying cases, when you buy them new, which is nice for storage and protection. And if you ever have to move, you can be very confident that you're not going to crush your headphones, if you're moving and that sort of thing. But not really transportable friendly if you're going to travel. I can grab these and my Hugo 2 and go to another room in my house, to a couch or out in my sunroom or something like that, and it works fine. But yeah, if you're going to want to travel with these, take them to a hotel or something like that. If you're traveling for a conference or whatever, you'll need to figure out how to get around that hurdle. Okay, let's dig into the sound then. So this is the most neutrally tuned Audeze that I have gotten on my head so far. And that also translates to, it is one of the most neutrally sounding, neutrally tuned headphones I have gotten on my head. I have really worked hard to identify a potential area of the frequency spectrum that is emphasized over others. Like, there are some headphones out there, like an accessible one that would make sense is like the Sennheiser HD650 or HD6XX, right? We often describe that as neutral warm because it is very balanced throughout the frequency spectrum, but there's a little bit of hint in the frequencies, a little bit of hint of more presence in the frequencies that translate to audible warmth. Something like the Beyerdynamic DT880, okay, or an OG Focal Clear would be another example, would be a still mostly neutral tuned headphone, but with a little emphasis in the treble that makes it neutral bright. I really have worked hard to see if there is a tack-on word to use with neutral with this headphone. And the only thing that I can come up with is maybe neutral air. Maybe. Because there does seem to be a fair bit in the air frequencies here, at least compared to some of the other top-of-the-line models that I still have on hand. Like, I still have Utopia, and then, you know now, since hopefully you watched my impressions video, I also have the Dan Clark Audio Stealth on hand. And this one is nice and airy. It's not forward, it's not fatiguing in that upper treble at all, but like there's a little bit more air to the sound, but still a very, very neutral overall tuning, frequency response-wise. There is perhaps just a hint of forwardness somewhere in like the 1 kilohertz, maybe 2 kilohertz. I don't think it's as high as 3 kilohertz. Okay, but somewhere in that range, just a hint of a little bit of forwardness that can kind of give that classic Audeze timbral feature of it just flirts with shoutiness here and there. Not a deal breaker even for me, who is very sensitive to that sort of thing. Like, that relative weakness is very relative and proportionate to the fact that this is a $4,500 top-of-the-line model, but it is there. Okay, there is excellent frequency extension in both directions, though, both in the bass and up in the treble. I just mentioned the airiness, but the bass is also very well extended and pretty close to linear all the way down to the lowest audible regions. Okay, so good job there. And then accompanying that bass extension is very good dynamic impact and slam to go with very good resolution and texture and pitch definition and articulation, that sort of thing, in the low end. The low end presence is not emphasized. It's still very neutral, but what is there has lots of nice rumble and some good punch and slam to it as well. So there's an element of physicality to the sound here as well. Now, it's still a very smooth and relaxed listen overall. So it strikes an excellent balance between being macro dynamic and quick and punchy, with still being an overall presentation that leans a little bit more towards the relaxed and smooth side. Okay, so it's kind of like Utopia in that, but I think Utopia is just slightly more aggressive than this one, just a little bit more forward in its presentation. Now, the resolution here is still very good. The resolution is absolutely worthy of the $4,500 price tag. It is competitive in both its macro and micro resolution prowess with other top-of-the-line models like the Abyss 1266, like the Utopia, okay, etc. It is right up there in the thick of it with that group. I think it might be just slightly more resolving than Utopia, maybe just behind 1266 on most gear. It has not quite caught Susvara on that level, okay? But again, it is competitive at the price point in terms of resolution. The spatial presentation is also pretty good. Okay, it doesn't strike me in its sound staging as particularly large nor particularly small in any of the three dimensions, meaning width, height, and depth. Okay, but it is very spatially balanced between those three dimensions. Like, no particular one of those things stands out as being emphasized more than the other. Whereas, say, like Utopia can sometimes sound narrow and deep. The Dan Clark Stealth, a little bit of a spoiler, I'm picking up that one is very wide, but it's a little shallower in the depth. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, but this one is very balanced in terms of those three dimensions of sound staging. Again, not standing out as being either big nor small, and it still has a bit of that Audeze place you in the middle of it so that stuff is going around behind you rather than, you know, the more speaker-like or like hi-fi-man-like kind of everything is out in front and you're in the audience. Okay, it still leans more towards the be in it than be presented it. Okay, kind of presentation. Now, the imaging and separation within the soundstage is also very good and is appropriate, I think, for the $4,500 price tag. Okay, Neil Peart, drummer for Rush, right? Okay, may he rest in peace. But he has those huge epic drum fills, like, Tom Sawyer is the classic example. Just that big drum solo that walks drum fill, that walks all the way across the soundstage. I noticed with the Audeze here that the center image compared with the perceived positions of left center and left right, which is backwards for you, okay, but center left and center right. The center image is pushed towards me just a hair. So that, like, on a drum fill, like I just described by Neil Peart, it kind of goes do-do-do-do-do and then comes at me a little bit in the center and then recedes just slightly a little bit further away, left of center again. That in Tom Sawyer, they go pan right to left. Okay. I likely would not have noticed that if I were not directly A-Bing this with something like Utopia, or having just heard the other high-end, top-of-the-line models that I have listened to recently and compared. I'll link to that in the description below as well. Okay, so not a deal breaker at all, but it is there. Okay, so the timbre overall is also good. So in my opinion, timbre has been an area where Audeze has struggled, and I probably failed to mention in this video, but I've said a lot. Still, for context, it's good. Like, I own the LCD-2 pre-phaser. Oh, there it is. I've had that one for a while. I have reviewed classic LCDX, the 2021 LCDX now. I have listened to LCD-3 pre-phaser for an extended period of time. I have listened to LCD-R, LCD-2.4, and I think that's enough to, like, convince you. I've heard a lot of Audeze LCDs, right? Timbre on this one has been the best yet. Okay, it's very good. There's still that slight hint of mid-shout, very faint on this one, rarely ever gets in the way, is more controlled and more tame in that regard than the Abyss 1266, so it's not even the worst at the $4,000 higher price point in terms of that. It's just there every once in a while. Then the treble timbre, I think because of that air that I just talked about, timbrally, the treble can have a bit of a shish timbral quality to it. So that, to some people, might sound a little bit imbalanced or peaky. Again, for me, it still sounds more realistic than it doesn't, and the timbre is overall pretty good. But those are just two areas, just a hint of mid-shout and a little bit more shish, to use a technical term, okay, in the treble timbre than some other top-of-the-line models that are around. But again, for me, not a deal breaker, okay, and the weaknesses, I think it bears repeating, the weaknesses that I have named, okay, that center image coming just slightly toward me, okay, in comparison to center left and center right, and then that hint of shout, and I don't know if you want to call the shishy quality of the treble timbre a weakness or not. Some people may just like that and think that sounds more natural. Okay, all of those are relative to this thing's excellent performance throughout the rest of the technicalities. They are just relative weaknesses to its own performance and relative weaknesses that are still appropriate for the price point. Like, you're not going to pick up random $2,000 headphone and it's just going to outperform where this thing is weak, okay? I can name some top-of-the-line models where that can happen. This is not one of those. Okay. So I think really that covers the bases on the sound description of this thing. So just for me personally, I have really enjoyed reviewing this headphone. It is an excellent sounding headphone. I have enjoyed its neutrality. It seems to be quite a generalist. Like, it sounds pretty darn good on a wide range of musical genres. It handles rock and metal well. It handles like EDM, electronic, and hip-hop well because it has good physicality and punch and slam. Not overbearing, but it's there and enough to be engaging. It has pretty good timbre. It has appropriate resolution for the price. It has good staging and all of that sort of thing. So, I mean, it is a good all-around headphone. It can be driven by some transportable devices. So you're not inherently tethered to a desk. Okay, again, some are going to push back on me on that one. I'm just telling you, with the transportable gear that I have on hand, they sound fine. Do they sound as good as Berkeley Alpha S2 DAC plus HPA V281 amp? No. Okay, but they sound fine. All right. Okay, and so yeah, that can open up some use cases. All right. It's still not as overall good or as natural sounding as Susvara. Okay, but I think that it is very competitive with the Utopias of the world. I prefer it to Abyss 1266. It may not be quite as resolving, and it does not hit as hard in the bass or have the bass presence that 1266 has, but it's no slouch in those areas. Okay, and yeah, I think Audeze has themselves a really solid product here. And when I scan what Audeze has done this year, they released the LCD-R this year, the 2021 revision of the LCD-X. This one, I've not even heard their carbon electrostat yet, but just with the three that I have heard, 2021 has been a very good year for Audeze. Okay, so round of applause to them, genuinely, on that. Okay, so a couple of plugs here before I go. As I said, I do have the Dan Clark Audio Stealth on hand, and so expect that review probably about a week-ish after this one drops. And then I will also do like a high-end / top-of-the-line roundup shootout part 2 kind of a thing, where I talk about where this one fits in the top of the line, where I talk about where the Stealth fits in, and how they fit relative to the other top of the line models like Susvara, 1266, Utopia, SR1A that I have already reviewed. And I think I will also include the Meze Empyrean Elite in there because I got questions about that after my first top of the line shootout video. All right, so with that, I expect this video to drop the day before Thanksgiving 2021, so happy Thanksgiving to my American viewers, and happy late November, Wednesday, Thursday, late November weekend to my viewers around the world. Thanks for supporting me. I am Wave Theory. Please like and subscribe, and enjoy the music, everyone.